So for lesson 6, we're going to break it up into 2 different days, but we are going to start on page 148, and you can have your notes out, and we'll go through part of the lesson and then do the rest for tomorrow. So as we begin reading, we're going to be talking still about ecosystems and then the different cycles that happen throughout it. Yesterday, looking at the food chain and the food pyramid, we saw that kind of cycle, but then we're going to see different cycles today. Every day in every ecosystem, animals produce waste. And we see that right away in our notes. Can get that down. Don't forget your name. So animals produce waste. Eventually, plants, animals, and all other organisms will die. There must be a way to clean up the waste and dead matter. And it's not the same we think of cleanup, so that's why it's got that cleanup, because it's not just you sweep it, you vacuum it, clean up. It gets cleaned a different way. So a fungus breaks down a log by releasing special chemicals. Materials from the log are then absorbed by the fungus and used as food. So when a tree falls and dies, there's actually going to be fungus that use that tree to live. With its yellow coloring and long body, it is not hard to see why this is called the banana slug. As it eats material on the forest floor, this decomposer can grow to be 25 centimeters long. And that's still pretty short. It's only about this big of a animal, but it can grow pretty big for a slug. Decomposers are organisms that eat waste and dead matter. So getting that down in our notes, so those are decomposers. By doing this, they break material into smaller pieces and put it back into the soil. Most decomposers are microorganisms like bacteria and fungi. Earthworms, flies, and slugs are also decomposers. Whenever you see something decaying or rotting, decomposers have been at work. So if you see maybe an animal dead on the side of the road, which is kind of gross, you're a lot of times going to see little flies around it, and they are actually helping the dead matter go away. So they might eat part of that dead animal, which is really gross to us, but that's actually how they survive. Decomposers have the important niche or role of recycling wastes. So they might clean up the waste by eating it, and then they're going to die, or another animal might eat them, but it goes into a cycling order that way. Decomposers change the waste and dead material into minerals and nutrients that plants can use. These plants will then be food for other organisms. In this way, minerals and nutrients become a cycle. A cycle is a repeated process. So right away, getting that into our notes. Is a repeated process or a repeating flow of material through a system. And we're going to see a lot of different cycles throughout in science and in our atmosphere. We see a bunch of different cycles that help our world run in a smooth way. There is a constant cycle of minerals and some nutrients moving from living things to the soil and back into living things. Decomposers are not the only things that break down dead matter. Fires also do this. When plants burn, their ashes become part of the soil. So as you look into, maybe you've seen on the news, like California forest fires, those are a really big problem, but sometimes people purposely start flat fires like in their farms, and that's to help the plants burn, and the ashes actually help the soil grow. So there can be benefits to fires. You can look and read on the bottom about the slime molds, the carpenter ants, and then the almond-scented millipede, and how those little small creatures actually are really beneficial. The first one that we're going to look at today is the nitrogen cycle. Cells in plants and animals need nitrogen to do their work. Nitrogen cycles through the ecosystems. It moves through the food chain and other processes. So it's one of those things that can get recycled. Nitrogen is all around us. Almost 8/10 or 80% of Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen gas. Most organisms cannot it should say cannot use, that word should go in, cannot use nitrogen from the air. So they can't just like grab the nitrogen from the air and use it. There is a process that it needs to go through before those animals can use it. They must use nitrogen compounds, which are chemicals that contain nitrogen, but nitrogen compounds form in many ways. So they can't just use plain nitrogen, they actually have to use compounds which just have some nitrogen in them. Nitrogen compounds can form in the atmosphere. So just in the air around us, nitrogen compounds can form, and it's not something you look at and can see. Super tiny, you'd have to use a microscope in order to see them, but they can form in the atmosphere. Lightning can cause nitrogen to combine with other gases in the air and make nitrogen compound. Rain carries these compounds to earth, soil, and water. So the nitrogen compounds are in the air. When the lightning hits, a lot of times there's rain with it, and then the rain is going to bring these compounds to the earth, soil, and water. Some kinds of bacteria make nitrogen compounds and put them into the soil. So bacteria actually play a really important role. We always think of getting rid of bacteria. There's actually some very good bacteria. Plant roots absorb the compounds along with the water in the soil. Some plants in tropical rainforests contain bacteria that make nitrogen compounds. So again, there's really beneficial or good bacteria. These plants grow in the upper branches of the trees in the forest. Bacteria living in special roots are able to take in nitrogen directly from the air. So most organisms can't take it directly from the air, but then there's special plants that can take it directly from the air. Herbivores get the nitrogen they need when they eat plants. So herbivores are organisms that just eat plants, and they get the nutrients they need when they eat plants. Carnivores get nutrients when they eat the herbivores. So when a carnivore who only eats other animals eats the herbivore, they get the nitrogen. Nitrogen returns to the soil or air when animals and plants die. It also returns in animals' waste products. Decomposers break down the remains of dead organisms and waste products. They change the animal's nitrogen compounds into kinds that plants can use. These compounds return to the soil or air, and the cycle repeats. People add nitrogen compounds to the soil. And again, that helps it grow. So many farmers use fertilizers that contain nitrogen. Fertilizers are materials that make soil for better growing crops. Nitrogen fertilizers are important to society. They help farmers grow more food in their fields. And you can just look through this cycle. The nitrogen cycle is actually what we just read here, but it just kind of breaks it down into each different part. So read through that to help you understand the nitrogen cycle. And then what you can do is put your notes in your book, and we're going to finish the rest tomorrow.